This is the story of how a wooden bucket started a war that killed 2,000 people, and how that bucket remains in enemy territory 700 years later, still unread, still a symbol of victory. The year is 1325, medieval Italy. The city of Modena sends soldiers on a night raid into rival Bologna. Their target is not a fortress, not a treasury, not a weapons cache. They steal a wooden bucket from a public well. Bologna demands the bucket back. Modena refuses. War is declared. Armies mobilize. The Battle of Zappolino is fought. 2,000 people die. And when the dust settles, Modena still has the bucket. Today, 700 years later, that bucket sits in a tower in Modena, displayed as a trophy, a symbol of victory. Bologna has never gotten it back, and Modena has never offered to return it. By the end of this video, you will understand how the stupidest wars in history reveal the deepest truths about human conflict, how petty insults mask serious rivalries, how symbols matter more than substance in politics, and why 2,000 medieval Italians died fighting over an object worth approximately nothing, while pretending it meant everything. Medieval Italy in 1325 is not a unified nation. Italy, as we know, will not exist for another 500 years. Instead, the Italian peninsula is divided into dozens of independent city-states, each controlling a small territory around an urban center. These city-states are wealthy, sophisticated, and constantly at war with each other. They compete for trade routes, political influence, and regional dominance. Florence, Venice, Genoa, Milan, Bologna, Modena, each is a mini-empire with its own government, army, and economy. This political fragmentation creates constant conflict. City-states form alliances, betray each other, and fight over borders, trade rights, and political supremacy. Medieval Italy is prosperous but chaotic, a patchwork of competing powers in perpetual low-intensity warfare. The deeper conflict driving Italian city-state wars is the struggle between two factions, Guelphs and Ghibellines. This is not just local rivalry. This is a continent-wide political division that has torn Italy apart for a century. The Guelphs support the Pope. They believe the Catholic Church should have supreme authority over political rulers. They favor papal influence, church power, and resistance to imperial control. The Ghibellines support the Holy Roman Emperor. They believe secular rulers should dominate, and the church should stay out of politics. They favor imperial authority and resist papal interference. Every Italian city-state splits along these lines. Some cities are Guelph, others are Ghibelline, and they hate each other with ideological fury that makes local disputes into proxy wars for European supremacy. Bologna is Guelph, loyal to the Pope. Modena is Ghibelline, loyal to the Emperor. They are not just rival cities. They are enemies in a religious political conflict that encompasses all of Italy. This is the context for the bucket. The two cities have been fighting on and off for decades. Border skirmishes, trade disputes, political intrigues. By 1325, they are looking for an excuse to escalate, and Modena finds one. In 1325, Modenese soldiers conduct a raid into Bolognese territory. The raid has military objectives: reconnaissance, harassment, testing defenses. But the soldiers also steal a trophy, a wooden bucket from a public well in Bologna. This is not accidental. This is deliberate insult. Taking a bucket from a public well is symbolic humiliation. Wells are communal property. The bucket represents Bologna itself. Stealing it is like capturing a city's flag, a gesture of contempt. The soldiers bring the bucket back to Modena as a war trophy. It is displayed publicly. Modena celebrates the insult. Bologna is furious. Bologna demands the bucket's return. Formal diplomatic requests are sent. Modena refuses. Not because the bucket has value, it is a wooden bucket worth almost nothing, but because returning it would be admitting defeat, acknowledging Bologna's authority, showing weakness. The bucket becomes a political symbol. Returning it means losing face. Keeping it means asserting dominance. For both cities, the bucket represents honor, and honor in medieval Italy is worth more than lives. Bologna escalates. If Modena will not return the bucket through diplomacy, Bologna will take it by force. War is declared, not over trade routes or territory or dynastic claims, over a bucket, and both sides treat this as perfectly reasonable. The War of the Bucket is not really about a bucket. Everyone knows this. The bucket is a pretext, a symbolic cause that masks deeper conflicts. Bologna and Modena have real grievances, border disputes, competing trade interests, Guelph versus Ghibelline ideology. But you cannot mobilize an army by saying, we are fighting over tariff rates and factional politics. You need a simple, visceral cause, something people can understand and rally behind. The bucket provides that. Modena stole from us. They refuse to return what is ours. They disrespect our city. This is clear. This is emotional. This justifies war in ways that complex economic disputes never could. The bucket is propaganda. It simplifies the conflict into a story of theft and honor. It makes the war comprehensible to common soldiers who do not understand Guelph Ghibelline theology or trade route economics. Stolen bucket, demand return, fight if necessary. Simple. Both sides use the bucket to rally support. Bologna frames the war as defending their honor and property. Modena frames it as resisting Bologna's arrogance and aggression. The bucket is rhetorically useful to both. But make no mistake, if the bucket had never been stolen, Bologna and Modena would have found another excuse to fight. The bucket is a convenient trigger, not the fundamental cause. The real causes are political, economic, and ideological rivalry that predates the bucket by decades. In November 1325, the two cities mobilize for battle. Bologna assembles an army of approximately 32,000 soldiers, infantry, cavalry, mercenaries. Modena fields about 7,000 troops. Bologna has overwhelming numerical superiority. The armies meet at Zappolino, a small town between the two cities. Bologna expects an easy victory. They outnumber Modena 4-1. Their strategy is straightforward. Crush the smaller army, march on Modena, take the bucket back by force. The Battle of Zappolino is a disaster for Bologna. Despite their numbers, they are outgeneraled and outfought. Modena's commander uses superior tactics, concentrated cavalry charges, disciplined infantry formations, exploitation of terrain. Bologna's larger army is poorly coordinated. Units fail to support each other. Cavalry charges are mistimed. The numerical advantage becomes a liability as confused masses of soldiers block each other's movement. Modena wins decisively. Bologna's army is routed. Approximately 2,000 soldiers die in the battle, mostly Bolognese. Bologna loses not just the battle, but its political prestige. The defeat is humiliating. And Modena keeps the bucket. After the battle, Bologna sues for peace. They are in no position to continue the war. Their army is shattered. Modena's victory has shifted the regional balance of power. Bologna must accept terms. The peace treaty addresses borders, reparations, political arrangements. It does not mention the bucket, because by this point, both sides understand the bucket was never the real issue. It was a symbol, a pretext, a propaganda tool. But Modena keeps the bucket anyway, not because it is valuable, not because the treaty requires it, but because keeping it is a continuing insult, a permanent reminder of Bologna's defeat, a trophy of Modena's superiority. The bucket is placed in Modena's Ghirlandaio Tower, the city's bell tower and most prominent landmark. It is displayed publicly, visible to everyone. Modena celebrates the bucket as a symbol of their victory. And it stays there for 700 years. Through medieval wars, Renaissance politics, Italian unification, 2 world wars, and into the modern era. The bucket remains in Modena's tower, still unrechared, still a trophy, still symbolizing a 700-year-old insult. The bucket itself is remarkably ordinary. It is a wooden bucket, oak, reinforced with iron bands, about 12 inches tall. The kind used to draw water from wells across medieval Europe. There is nothing special about its construction or materials. What makes it significant is context. This bucket represents 2,000 deaths. It symbolizes medieval honor culture. It exemplifies how petty disputes escalate into catastrophic violence, and it proves that symbols can outlast the conflicts that created them. The bucket is not even the original anymore. The wooden bucket displayed in the tower today is a replica. The original bucket, assuming it survived 700 years, which is doubtful for wood, is kept in Modena's Civic Museum under preservation conditions. But the replica in the tower serves the same symbolic function. It represents Modena's victory. It reminds visitors of the War of the Bucket. It perpetuates the 700-year-old insult to Bologna. And Bologna still wants it back. In modern times, Bologna has occasionally requested the bucket's return, half seriously, half as historical curiosity. Modena refuses, not because they need the bucket, not because it has value, but because tradition dictates that war trophies are never returned. This is the absurdity that persists. 2 modern Italian cities, both part of the same nation, both democracies, both friendly, maintain a symbolic rivalry over a wooden bucket stolen in 1325. The original conflict is meaningless now, but the symbol endures. The War of the Bucket teaches several lessons about how conflicts work, lessons that apply far beyond medieval Italy. First, the stated cause of war is rarely the real cause. Conflicts have deep roots: economic competition, political rivalry, ideological division. But wars need simple justifications that rally public support. The bucket provides that simplification. This pattern repeats throughout history. Wars are fought over honor, insults, symbolic acts, while the real causes are resource competition, power struggles, and strategic interests that are too complex to explain to soldiers. Second, symbols matter more than substance in political conflict. The bucket is worthless as an object, but as a symbol of honor, dominance, and pride, it is worth 2,000 lives. Politics operates on symbols. Flags, anthems, monuments, gestures. These shape how people understand conflict. Returning the bucket would not cost Modena anything material, but symbolically, it would be admitting defeat 700 years later. So the bucket stays, because politics is about perception, not reality. Third, honor culture creates irrational escalation. Medieval Italian city-states operated on honor logic. Insults must be avenged, disrespect cannot be tolerated, face must be saved. This logic makes violence inevitable even when both sides lose from fighting. Bologna lost 2,000 soldiers in the battle. Modena won but spent resources and lives fighting. Both sides would have been better off negotiating, but honor culture made compromise impossible. The insult of the stolen bucket demanded response, and response demanded war. Modern nations still operate on similar logic. International conflicts escalate over symbolic issues, territorial disputes with no economic value, historical grievances with no practical relevance, prestige competitions that benefit no one. Honor, pride, and face-saving drive decisions that rational cost-benefit analysis would reject. Fourth, war trophies perpetuate conflict. The bucket is not just a historical curiosity, it is a continuing symbol of division. Every generation of Modenese learns that their city defeated Bologna. Every generation of Bolognese remembers the insult. Symbols preserve grievances across centuries. Monuments, flags, trophies, they keep old conflicts alive. The bucket ensures that 700 years later, the War of the Bucket is still remembered, still shapes city identity, still maintains symbolic rivalry. This is why some nations remove war monuments after reconciliation. Symbols matter. Trophies keep wounds fresh. The bucket could have been returned or destroyed after the war, allowing both cities to move on. Instead, it remains a permanent reminder of medieval stupidity. Fifth, the stupidest wars reveal the deepest patterns. The War of the Bucket seems absurd. Fighting over a bucket is obviously ridiculous, but it reveals how all wars work: simplified justifications, symbolic causes, honor logic, propaganda narratives. Every war looks stupid in retrospect. Future generations wonder how anyone thought the causes justified the deaths. The bucket makes this obvious by being so absurdly trivial, but the mechanisms, honor, symbolism, escalation, propaganda, are universal. The War of the Bucket is not uniquely stupid. It is just honestly stupid. It reveals what other wars hide, that the stated causes are often absurd, the real causes are prosaic power struggles, and the symbols matter more than substance. Modern wars follow the same patterns. Border disputes that could be negotiated instead escalate to violence. Trade conflicts become military confrontations. Symbolic gestures, insults to flags, historical grievances, territorial claims with no economic value drive nations to war. The bucket is a perfect metaphor because it is so obviously worthless. Modern wars fight over resources that have value: oil, territory, trade routes. But often the symbolic significance exceeds the material value. Nations fight not because they need the resource, but because losing face is unacceptable. The bucket also reveals how propaganda works. Both sides need to convince their populations that war is justified. You cannot mobilize armies by admitting we are fighting over trade routes and political influence. You need a simple, emotionally resonant cause. Stolen bucket, insulted honor, defending our city, these work. Complex economic and political explanations do not. The bucket simplifies the conflict into a story anyone can understand and support. Modern wars use the same techniques. Pearl Harbor, the Maine, the Gulf of Tonkin, specific incidents that simplify complex conflicts into clear aggression narratives. The incidents may be real, exaggerated, or fabricated, but they serve the same function as the bucket. They make war comprehensible and justified. The perpetuation of the bucket as a trophy shows how symbols outlast their original meaning. The Guelph-Ghibelline conflict that underlay the war is long dead. The border disputes are resolved. The trade competition is irrelevant. But the bucket remains, and it still means something, not the original meaning, but a new meaning. pride, city identity, historical memory. The bucket is now about Modena's character, not about medieval politics. This is how symbols work. They persist after their original context disappears. They accumulate new meanings while retaining old associations. The bucket started as an insult. It became a war trophy. Now it is heritage, tradition, tourist attraction, but it still carries the original insult underneath. The fact that Modena will not return the bucket, 700 years later, to a friendly fellow Italian city in the same nation, shows how deeply symbolic logic runs. There is no rational reason to keep it, no material benefit, no strategic advantage. But returning it would be admitting that Modena was wrong to keep it, that Bologna deserves it back, that the 700-year victory is nullified, so it stays, because symbolically, returning a war trophy is defeat. This is the madness of honor logic. It persists across centuries. It survives the death of the conflict. It continues to shape decisions long after the original stakes are forgotten. The bucket controls both cities 700 years after the war, dictating that Modena must keep and Bologna must resent. The War of the Bucket is history's most honest war. It does not pretend to be about freedom, security, or civilization. It is about a bucket, and 2,000 people died for it. Every war claims noble causes: defense of homeland, spreading democracy, protecting allies, maintaining honor. But strip away the rhetoric, and most wars are about power, resources, and pride. The bucket war is just honest about it. The soldiers who died at Zappolino died for Guelph Ghibelline politics, regional trade dominance, and city-state pride. But they were told they were dying for the bucket, because the bucket was simple. The bucket was an insult they could understand. The bucket justified violence in a way that tariff disputes never could. Modern soldiers die for oil, strategic position, and geopolitical influence. But they are told they are dying for freedom, democracy, or defense, because the real causes are too cynical to inspire sacrifice. The noble narrative is necessary propaganda. The bucket is the rare case where the propaganda is obviously ridiculous. No one really believes 2,000 deaths were justified by a bucket, but they believe honor was at stake. City pride was challenged. Insults must be avenged. These are the real motivations, and they are barely less absurd than the bucket. The bucket persists because humans need symbols. Identity, pride, history, these are constructed from symbols. Modena is the city that won the bucket. Bologna is the city that lost it. These identities are built on a 700-year-old theft and a battle where 2,000 people died over nothing. But identity is always built on such stories. National anthems, flags, monuments, all symbolize historical events that seemed important at the time. The bucket is just more obviously stupid than most. But is dying for a flag really less absurd than dying for a bucket? Both are objects, both are symbols. Both represent something people decided was worth killing for. The War of the Bucket is a mirror. It shows us our own absurdity. We mock medieval Italians for dying over a bucket, but we do the same. We just use different symbols and better propaganda. The bucket war is not uniquely stupid. It is universal stupidity, honestly presented. And that is why it matters. Not because it is exceptional, but because it is typical. It reveals what every war is underneath the noble rhetoric. A contest over symbols, driven by pride, justified by propaganda, and remembered selectively. Modena still has the bucket. It sits in a tower, a trophy from 1325. Bologna still remembers losing it, and 2,000 people died in the battle that followed. Was the war worth it? No. Could it have been avoided? Absolutely. Was anyone better off after the war than before? No. Did anyone gain anything of real value? No. But Modena has the bucket, and that, apparently, is what mattered. The War of the Bucket teaches that the stupidest wars reveal the deepest truths. Strip away the noble causes, the strategic justifications, the historical narratives. What remains is humans fighting over symbols, because pride matters more than lives. 2,000 people died for a bucket, and 700 years later, we still have not learned the lesson.